Hey chatters. Last time we were coding together, we built something called Babblescribe, which was just to try to show you how you could make your own transcription tool using the OpenAI API. Before we continue to solve that and plug different large language model features into there, I just want to take a break and help us think conceptually about how to structure the code we're writing, because it's going to help us better communicate it to the large language model, as well as help us know what to expect. I adhere to the principles as much as I can, especially because I can't really code to modularity. And what I mean by modularity is you want to be able to Lego block things out as much as you can. This is where maybe you've heard the word code snippet before. It's just a little chunk of code that you can use over and over for pretty much anything. It really is a building block. And then if you have enough of these building blocks, you can start building some pretty incredible things because you can chunk it out and really piece it together. So when we're writing our code, there's a couple ways we want to be thinking about it as we're going to writing it, especially because if you're using large language models to write this code, you can only output so much at any given time. So the same thing of a skeleton of thought ideas, like we want to outline the code, and that includes the organization and the folder structure, but it also has certain configurations that we can work with. This is what I actually mean when I say modular. So if we just look at this diagram for a second, we typically want to have some main function up at the top. This is usually called main.py or an index.js, whatever. You can call it whatever you want, though. This is just where everything gets orchestrated, which means that you're going to have all these functions, and this is the one that sequences them appropriate. Under that main function is going to have all these little sub functions. And you might have one that is like we had in terms of pulling on the Whisper API to do the transcription, but it might be all kinds of things like moving a file this way or that, or creating a folder, or whatever you want it to do. But this is just going to help us break it down. And of course, you could break this down even further, right? You could have folders of sub functions to keep things organized, but it really depends on how complex your code gets. You want to try to keep it simple, like one folder with a few things that you can to start. And then on top of that, we're typically going to have some sort of configuration file. This is usually a config.yaml, which we'll talk about in the next video. But you have to imagine within each of these functions, there might be some variability that you want to have control over, but you don't want to have to go and find in every single function where it is and go and have to change it manually. And then that messes it up over here, and I forgot to change it there. This is just one file that is going to have those configurations so that if you change it in the config file, it changes it everywhere else in your code that you specify. Okay, so that's the one thing I want to talk about. This is how we want to think about modular code. The next thing we want to talk about is the large language model space and how freaking messy it's getting at the moment. We have our major providers I've given the logos for up here. We have Meta, OpenAI, Google's Gemini, Mistral, Anthropic, and Quen. This one's from China. There's obviously many more. I could have named a bajillion on here, but the idea here is we have our major players, and they're the ones making the foundational models. But of course, they all have different ways to call their APIs, and it becomes very difficult if you want to, for example, use GPT for this, but Claude for that, and blah, 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 blah. They all are different. It's going to just make your code enormous. But you really want to take a moment and think about, okay, how do we narrow this down? On top of that, you also have this whole open source ecosystem. Yes, I know Mistral and Meta are also open source, but you know what I'm saying? There's all these like smaller models that are built off of these foundational models. They're fine-tuned for some specific reason, have a certain data set, whatever it might be. And there are a bajillion of these. And so again, if you want to test these out, and these are obviously the cheaper ones because they're smaller and they might be more specific to what you need to accomplish. I recently found something called OpenRouter, which we'll head over to in a minute. But the idea behind OpenRouter is that this abstracts away the need to input every single little thing for this. All you have to have for OpenRouter is their API key. And then you take that, and then there's a specific way to call on different models. So like I was just talking about, you can have a config file of all the different models in there and be constantly changing them without having to deal with 1,000 API keys and managing where everything is. So let's head over to OpenRouter. But the takeaway I want you to take from this is we're really looking to figure out how do we funnel everything through kind of one area? How do we make it so that things are very modular and configurable? And we'll obviously set things up the way that we want or have some defaults. You're doing yourself a favor in the long run. Here we are in OpenRouter. We're going to start off by just going to browse. This is just to show you they have every single model. Like, it's pretty ridiculous. I don't even know how many are on here. But you can see they have all the major ones that obviously you can search. So if I want to do GPT-4o, it's obviously not going to come up when I look because I didn't put the thing in here, whatever. Okay, here it is. We got mini, we got 4o. So you can just search for whatever model. And if we just go into this one, for example, you can just copy and paste this little tag right here into your code. And then again, you can have that as the config, whereas, okay, I want this model for this program, but you're always pulling from OpenRouter. You can go to the docs here. You can look at this and put this in your arsenal of things to put in an LLM call when you're coding. And then you just got to make sure, like always, you got to set up some credits. So you're going to have to give some money. See, I got nothing in here right now. And then you got to create an API key and make sure that you have something to plug into whatever you're using. That's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to get back to coding. I'm going to show you now how to start incorporating large language model calls using OpenRouter and creating a config file and all that kind of stuff with our example with Babblescribe. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.